Welcome to Laugh Through It All. I'm your host, Tracy. Join me as I talk to licensed clinical psychologist Terry Bly about helping families navigate the teen years. All right, so can you explain some of the key developmental changes that teenagers go through and how these changes can affect their behavior?
I think the one major part of adolescence that we know about, but it's still important to reiterate, is that adolescence is about establishing their own identity separate from their parents.
Hmm.
And what I always find kind of cruel about nature is parents don't simultaneously feel a need to separate from those kids. And so the kids are trying to push the parents away. The parents don't want to push the kids away. But the kids, teenagers really need to be figuring out, who am I separate from my parents? What are my values? Not just because my parents had these values. Like, what do I actually believe? What do I actually care about? What's important to me? Um, who am I when I'm not, you know, part of I'm always part of this family, but you know what I mean? Like, how am I separate from my parents? And to answer those questions, a lot of times adolescents will kind of go to the extreme, or they'll break rules, they'll they'll violate boundaries, they'll do things because they're testing. Like, how does this feel? How does it feel if I try this thing? How does it feel if I break this rule? How does it feel if I declare that I'm no longer, want to be part of this church that my is so important to my parents? And I think parents tend to freak out that their kid is going off the rails, or they're, oh, now I've got this teenager who's going to be, next thing you know, they're going to be in jail for shoplifting. But it really is
Yeah,
critical. And to be clear, not every kid expresses this in the same way. I mean, I have
sure.
well, my oldest daughter now is 21. My youngest is 18, but it looked very different with them. My oldest didn't feel as strong of a need to push me away as my younger one did, and that happens a lot. We get one teenager who's more compliant, is more rule following, and we get the other one who's choosing a different path. So it doesn't, of course, it doesn't look the same in every teenager, and sometimes girls it looks different than boys or whatever. But generally speaking, from a developmental standpoint, that's what we want them to be doing, because the whole point of adolescence is preparing for adulthood, and
Hmm.
adulthood means being separate from your parents. And so this is what they're gearing up for, which means as parents, we need to be supporting that so that our kids feel confident that they are capable of individuating, of separating, of being okay once they leave home.
And what age, I mean, I know we're talking about teens and
Mhm.
adolescents, and so what age do you typically start to see the biggest change in them trying to get their own independence?
I mean, middle school is when they're starting to ask the question of, where do I fit in? Who are my people?
Yes.
Which can
Yes.
also mean, who are my people separate from my parents? Who are my people separate from my church? Who are my people separate from the community I was given,
Mhm.
from my cousins, or, whatever? Like, who are my people? So that's when they start to explore different communities, let's say. So that's why
Yeah.
some parents are like, I loved all my kids' friends. They had this great group of friends, and then they went into middle school, and now they've got this group of friends that, like, they
Mm,
terrify me. I don't care for these kids,
mm-mm.
right? Because they're trying to figure out, who are my people. So that's the first time we really see some of that big change. And then I think, again, it kind of differs for each kid. I think we start to see a real shift once, for those teenagers who get their driver's license and start driving around 16. A lot of times that's another significant shift
Yes.
in independence, because now they have a means to be independent, and to they have that autonomy, they have that agency, literally, to, like,
Yes.
drive their own bus
Right,
or
right.
civic or whatever it is, right? And so
Yeah.
I think, even though not every 16-year-old, of course, gets a car or even wants to drive, I think that becomes an age where even their friends might be driving. So there still is kind of this introduction into separation from parents. I don't rely on them
Mhm,
solely anymore
mhm.
to get to where I want to go.
And that is, of course, the opposite for us. Like, they pull away, and that is where our security and we start to feel. I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Okay.
girl 14, boy 16, and they're so drastically different in how they handle
Mhm.
situations, and when they're raised exactly the same. I mean, we
Yep.
think exactly the same, but when they're raised the same, and they are two different creatures, and you think, how
Yep.
did one get all of that and another one did not?
But I think when we're talking about parenting, just in general, I think we overestimate, and I think a lot of books and articles and podcasts over inflate the reality here. I think we overestimate how much power we have in shaping our children. We
Yeah.
certainly have some, but I think we're led to believe we have more than we do. And that's why you can have two kids that you think you're raising the same and they turn out totally differently because
Yes.
there are a million factors that have nothing to do with how we raise them. A lot of times, I also talk about an interaction effect between the temperament the kid comes into the world with and the parents that they're given. And sometimes there's a good match there, and
Hmm.
sometimes there's a mismatch. You
Right.
could get two parents who growing up were big rule followers, high achievers, maybe overachievers who did, all the things after school and were, and then they get a kid who doesn't want to do anything, maybe just wants to get a job, right?
Yeah.
And this is a mismatch, right? Parents who are these super high achievers have a hard time knowing how to parent a kid who has no interest in doing any of that. And they think that kid is wrong, is like doing something wrong, or that they're, something wrong with their kid or they're parenting wrong. And really it's just they just got a kid who's different from them. Favorite piece of parenting advice. And at first it feels a little heartbreaking, but once you lean into it, I love it. And it's parent the child you have, not the one you want. And I
Mm,
love that because
absolutely.
it reframes things. And yes, it can be heartbreaking to have to admit to yourself, like, this is not maybe the kid I would have chosen if I'd gotten to like select all the traits and all the things
Right.
on some sort of like menu.
Right.
But once you accept that and then go, okay, but this is the child I have, how can I parent this child? I think
Mm,
it's very freeing because you're done fighting it.
right.
Once you accept it, you're done fighting with that reality. And then you can really start to create that connection with that
Yeah,
kid
because I
that you're
think
raising.
you try to have these perceived, you have these preconceived notions of how things are going to be and
Mm-hmm.
how your kids are going to be. I mean, we all do
We
that
all
on
do.
what we want for our kids and what they're
Mm-hmm.
going to do. And you do set yourself up for failure if you've got the bar set so high, and it may not even be something
Yeah.
they're interested in.
Yeah. Set the bar so high, or you just set a bar in a different category that your kid
Yes.
is like, don't care.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't
Yes,
care if
very
you love
much.
this thing. Don't care if you've been, spending thousands of dollars on this one sport when I was little. Like, I don't like it. And
Yes.
so, but when we stop fighting it, I think that's so important because, again, when we're talking about adolescence, it's this interesting dichotomy. They're separating from us, but it's scary. Even if they don't recognize it's scary to separate from us. And so they need to know that we still love them for exactly
Right.
who they are, even when they're like showing us their worst side or they're doing things that are blatantly in defiance of what we've asked for them. They're they're acting like they're pushing us away, but there's this part of them that is also very much paying attention to how we react and if we still love them and if we still approve of them. And it's we don't because we don't see necessarily both sides of that as parents, we
Right.
have to keep it in mind during that individuation period because it is I just can never overemphasize how critical it is for parents to always communicate the message. I think you're great exactly for who you are. Like, I don't want to change you. And even when we're trying to correct, even if we see them going down a bad path, that doesn't mean we don't say anything or we don't intervene, but it has to be with this overarching place of, but I think you're amazing.
Yeah.
And I know what you're capable of, and I love you, and I'm going to be here for you no matter which path you choose. Because I get so many teenagers in my office who are just heartbroken, just
Mm,
devastated
mm.
when they feel like their parent is not able to give that message. When they feel like no matter what they do, their parent wants more. Their parent's like, okay, cool, you got this full ride scholarship. What are you going to do next? Or you got a full ride scholarship, but it's not for the school that I think you should go to, or whatever. And so it's really hard to see that.
So how do you get the message to the kids that, that it might be something that is, I shouldn't say wrong, but something that the parent needs to work on and they're not equipped to
Mhm.
show that? How can you help a kid move past that feeling?
It's I mean, by trying to at least give them some of that myself as the therapist,
Sure.
um, by letting them know that I'm not going anywhere
Mhm.
and pointing out what I think is amazing about them. It's really hard. And it's finding other people in their environment. Do they have relatives? Do they have people in their community? Do they have neighbors who, they get some of that acceptance
Yeah, so help
from as
them,
parents? Yeah,
yeah,
help
decide
them find
seek it
other
out.
people who
Mhm.
can give them some of that reassurance that they are amazing and they do have a lot to offer, and they are lovable and likable
Right.
and
Because
good
so
enough.
many people spend a lifetime still trying to get that,
Yeah.
that reassurance from the one parent. The other parent could be giving it to you, but they spend a lifetime feeling that way about one of the parents. And it's so sad to me.
It is, and I try to work with them too once they're out of high school. That's when I try to work with them on grieving that,
Oh,
grieving that
yes.
they're not going to get the parent that they
Yes.
wanted. And work through the anger. There's I always we Kids have such a hard time expressing anger towards a parent because they feel so guilty about that.
Yes.
And we don't get stuck in the blame. It's not about just getting, living with your anger and resentment the rest of your life. It's about first just acknowledge it that there's some anger there and there's some hurt, and
Hmm.
then we'll grieve through it, and then we'll figure out what kind of relationship can you have with this parent.
Okay.
Not I tend not to go with teenagers to, do you want to have a relationship with this parent or not? It's usually
Sure.
what kind of relationships do you want to have? What interactions can you have that will feel good? What topics can you talk about?
Oh, I like
What
that.
kind of
Yes.
things can you ask them for help doing? Um,
Yes.
but stop
Yeah, I
trying to
like
ask
that.
them for these deep, heartfelt conversations if they're not
Hmm.
capable of doing that.
Hmm. Hmm. So what are some effective communication like strategies that parents could use to engage their teens to where they know that you're coming from a place, because a lot of teens you'll say, well, I love you anyway, it doesn't matter. They'll be like, oh, whatever, whatever, whatever. I mean, do you just keep saying those things knowing that they're still listening? Or what else could you communicate? What are some strategies?
So I think the biggest thing for parents of teenagers is to remember is that you're not going to get immediate feedback if you're on the
Hmm.
right track. It cannot, when parents are like, well, I did that and it didn't work. I say teenagers are not known for giving positive feedback
Right?
when you're on the
Isn't
right
that the
track.
truth?
So
If
you're
you ever
doing
want to
this
know if
for,
you're
yeah,
failing, just talk to your teens.
yeah, exactly. If you're doing this for an ego boost, bad news for you.
That's not the way to go.
Nope, they are not going to let you know if you're on the right track. You just have to trust yourself. The image I always use with parents of teenagers, and we're talking 16 and up, but sometimes 15 and up, is you're walking alongside them now. And so the first thing I try to do with parents is to get them to stop pulling their kid along. Stop trying to push them to where you think they need to go.
Okay.
Start creating an image in your mind of walking alongside them, because once your teenager sees that you're meeting them where they're at
Hmm.
and now you're there to walk alongside them, they they're going to feel more permission to talk to you about what is going on, because you're there to say, okay, this is where you're at,
Hmm.
and I'm going to accept that. Even if I don't like it, I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to work with that. And how can I
I
help
think
you?
I understand where you're going. So can you give me an example of where you mean like walk aside them and not, no judgment, no advice, just, is that what you're meaning
Yeah,
by walk
unless they
aside?
ask for it.
Okay.
It's walking alongside them like you would, like going for a walk with a friend, right? You're
Okay.
walking alongside them, and they're gonna ask you for advice sometimes, but sometimes they just want to talk and they just want you to listen.
Hmm.
But you're there. You're there next to them, and you're saying, really, the your interactions with your teenager are really centered around, what do you need from me?
Okay.
What can
I
I
was
do?
going to say I've heard that's the best thing to do. Actually, with advice
Hmm.
in general is,
Hmm.
a
Yes.
friend,
Yeah.
your kids, where if they don't always want you to solve their
Hmm.
problem. And
And your
sometimes
teenagers rarely want you to solve their problems.
absolutely.
Um,
They're not
and
gonna
nor
listen
should
anyway.
you. And nor
Huh?
should you, because we want our teenagers to figure out how to solve
Mhm.
their own problems or to use the resources that aren't you, like talking to their teacher, talking
Mhm.
to the guidance counselor at school, talking to a therapist, talking to their friends, talking to their aunt or uncle. Like, where else can you encourage them to go if they want advice? And when we indulge our own desire to have our kids come solely to us, because it does
Mhm.
feel so good, I think we do them a disservice. And so I think it's good when our kids don't want to tell us everything. And for
Okay.
us to get hurt and react to that, I think does more harm than good. And if they're like, I can tell you're having a rough day. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Okay. Um, if you continue feeling like this, I hope you will find someone you can talk to,
Mm,
even if
okay.
it's okay that it's not me.
Right.
But if this is really bothering you, I hope you can find somebody you do feel comfortable talking to. And if you need my help, let me know. And not pry. Like when we
Mhm.
push, oh, I'm really worried about you. I don't like that you're not talking to me. Should I call your therapist because I feel like this is a problem because you're not talking to me and something's
Right.
obviously bothering you. Like that's I think when we really get ourselves into trouble.
Even my daughter will say, I'll be like, "Is there something wrong? What's wrong? You seem a little off." And she'll be like, "No, you asking me if something's wrong is making me have
If
something wrong."
I hear that I hear that all the time
Oh my
from
god,
my
I'm like,
younger one.
gosh,
Oh,
excuse
yeah.
me."
If I'd be like, "Are you okay? You seem kind of upset." Well, I am now.
It's like we can't win. It's like,
No.
"Okay, I will just be quiet and not ask."
Yep.
But I can't help myself.
Sometimes I tried shifting it to sometimes if it really like my younger one has quite the she gives off quite the intense aura when she's not in a good place. And so and
Yes.
she would get mad at me if I'd point that out. So I kind of shifted over into saying, I'm just going to let you know, you look like you're having a bit of a rough day. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. But if you're not and you're fine or something else, totally, I just wanted you to know that
Mhm.
I think
Can
you look
sense
really
it. Right.
upset. Rather than putting in a question, what's wrong? Are you
As you're
okay?
formulating
Yeah.
the right words to use.
Yes. Just
Oh,
giving
not
you
that
some
word. That's
feedback. You look
yeah,
a little pissed off.
exactly.
So if you're going out with your friends and you still look like this, they might think you're pissed off.
Right, right. I do that
Just
with my
letting you
daughter,
know.
but it's her
Yeah.
tone. Well,
Yeah.
the way
Yep.
your tone is telling me that you are agitated,
Yeah. Yep.
and yeah, it's
Or if you're not agitated, then people might misinterpret that tone.
yes,
I might not be
yes,
the only one who thinks you sound agitated.
right.
Maybe I am, and my daughter, would love to be like, "You're the only one who ever says this to me." Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Have you ever seen that? It's like a video or a little meme or something, and a kid is standing at the school and he's laughing with all of his friends, and then he turns and sees his mom and he smiles and he goes like
yeah,
dead
yeah,
face when he sees
exactly,
his family, but it's like, what in the
yeah,
world did I do?
yeah. And
It's
again, when we take that personally, is
yes.
when a relationship with our teenagers tends to go south. It's
Hmm.
because I've never, I never imagined before having kids how much teenagers would push me to how much I took personally and
Yes.
how I had to let that go. And and then I had teenagers and was like, "Oh, if I keep taking this stuff personally, I'm going to be a miserable human being and not a great mom. I have got to
Right.
work on this because my mom hopefully she won't listen to this, but my mom takes everything personally."
Right. So does my mom,
And yeah,
for
and it
sure.
was not helpful to me.
Yes.
I felt like I couldn't really tell her anything or push back or anything because she would just take it all personally. And so I didn't when I realized I was doing that same thing to my kids, I was like, this is not helping and I don't want to
Hmm.
I need to like get thicker skin so I can
It's
not
so
be reactive.
difficult.
It is so
It's so
difficult.
difficult because I think that's what the point I forgot about earlier is we try so hard for them to be good humans, and then if they
Hmm.
don't want to be in our presence or they don't want to take advice from us, it's like, but I'm saying these things because I want to help you.
Yeah. Yep.
You
Yep.
don't want them to go through. I would say more my daughter than my son. I don't want my daughter to go through some of the worries that I worried about at her
Hmm.
age. You
Yeah.
know, they're very different people, and my son has nowhere near the issues that a teenage girl, or at least I think that teenage girls have. I
Yeah.
mean, that's my only
They have different
experience.
issues. My observation is boys have different issues than girls, but
They do.
um
Do
yeah.
I mean, what would you say are some of the differences?
Oh, well, the boys that there is something going on with boys when it comes to transitioning from high school to college.
Oh,
Um, I think I counted the last year, 9 clients whose freshman sons failed out of their first year of college. Um, and it was almost always the same thing. I think, first of all, I think video games probably
sure.
plays a role because there's no way college can compete with how exciting,
Right.
compelling video
Absolutely.
games are. I
Yes.
mean, to go from these like reality based, like immersive with their friends, live, exciting, action packed, achievement focused video games to like calculus. I mean,
Right.
that's just, there's no competition, right? So I think there's that. But they also, well, and then I do think there's a lot of marijuana use going around that's not
Mm,
helping. But what they'd seem to really struggle with is asking for help. They'd get to college, they would start falling behind, and they'd be too embarrassed to tell a parent, too embarrassed to reach out to a professor. And so they'd just stay in their room and not let anyone know they were
mm,
struggling until it was too late. And then they'd fail out. And that's been the story with almost every single one of them. And these are from very different parents, very like across the spectrum, race, uh, sexual, like there's no other pattern except that they
right.
were quietly failing out of college and not telling anyone until it was too late. And so boys, I think, are having issues with identity, I think, and figuring out where they fit in and where's their place and where can they succeed and how to do that. I think they're not feeling particularly empowered in some ways. I could get into like how that's fed into some of the social movements going on right now, but I do think boys have felt pretty disempowered and they're looking for that. Um, Girls, I think, is just heightened versions of the way it's always been with girls.
Mm,
It's, am I attractive enough? Where do I fit in? Who's going to like me? Who's going to love me? Who's going to want me? Um, and I think they're under such scrutiny um, from a aesthetic perspective,
for sure.
and like just the restricted range of clothing it seems like they can wear now. Like every person, parent from all over the country whose daughter's going to homecoming or prom, it's like they handed out uniforms. It
Mm,
doesn't matter where they are; they're all wearing the
hmm.
exact same thing.
Yes.
Graduation, all the dresses, all the girls wear short white dresses.
Yep.
Like 99% of them. So I think there's been this narrowing of what's acceptable
Right.
aesthetically for girls rather than an expansion. I think it's been narrowed, and that pressure I think has been very hard for girls.
And in a time where, women are getting married later, they're having
Hmm.
babies later, they're more independent, they're more business minded. You would think that with that movement that they would have more
Yeah.
self awareness and not.
I don't know if we have enough data on Gen Z yet to see if they're more
Mhm.
independent, business minded, career focused.
That's true. Yeah.
I think they're a different generation than the
You're right. You're
millennials.
right. You're right. Um Friends, I don't that is such like I get
Yeah.
so worked up with that. It's terrible in the middle school.
Yeah.
I I think it bothers me more than it bothers my daughter because she just wants a good friend,
Hmm.
and they all hang out in a group and someone's always left out, someone's always made, to feel left out, and it's constant.
And
And
that's the more, I mean, that's almost refreshingly normal. Then,
real,
I mean,
yeah.
that's how middle school has historically been for girls, has
Yeah,
been
yeah,
fighting to
I
fit
could say
in.
that I felt that same way
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Now with social media, I feel, she can
Yeah.
see that all of the friends are together, but
Hmm.
she's not there.
Yeah.
But I mean, she is a little bit different. She doesn't like to have sleepovers, she goes to sleepovers and everyone's on their phone and she's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
let's go do something."
I mean, there is that. Definitely the differences are, the phones. Kids, I think kids are struggling with the social stuff because they're just not interacting with each other. I also think the
Yes.
consequences for making mistakes are infinitely higher than they were when
Yes.
we were that age.
Absolutely.
That's the part that scares me the most is they just don't have room to make mistakes because if it's recorded by anybody, it's all over. And
Yep.
that's terrifying to me
Mm-hmm.
that kids can't screw up. They can't um they can't make a poor choice that
No.
adolescents would developmentally would be normal for them to make without it potentially haunting them forever. And that's the part that I like keeps me up at night.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Even, going out and I'll go out looking, I don't care. I'm just
mhm,
running to the store
yeah,
where she'll be like, "Well, no, what if we see somebody?" I'm like, "But
mhm,
Lainey, I don't people know what I look like when
yeah,
I'm done up and am dressed nice." I said, "It's going to be okay." She's like, "No, if any of my friends see us, they'll take your picture and then they'll
yeah,
spread it around and say, 'Look how bad, her mom
yeah,
looks.'" And I'm
yeah.
like, "Oh my God."
Right? It's horrifying. Like I'm grateful every single day that I did not grow up with this stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, they do. It's not. You can't even teach them. You can't even teach them like it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Like it's
No.
okay to go out looking because it does. It actually matters. There
Yes.
are consequences, and so the way we parent has to be like we have to adjust to that reality because there are things that are different than when we were kids, and we do have to help our kids navigate a world that's very different from the one we did. Where that feeling like everybody's watching you when we were growing up, it's called spotlight. I just blanked on the name, like something like spotlight syndrome, where it's normal for middle school kids, especially girls, to feel like the whole world's watching them.
Yeah.
Like that's been the normal thing for as long as they've
Okay.
been studying this. But now it's more true. It's more actual, like the things we
Yes.
were afraid of when we were adolescents are now actual realities. And so that fear that people are watching you and are judging you is now actually something that could be happening. They could watch you, judge you, take your picture, send it around, and now like
Mhm.
that's it's gonna ruin your day, your week, your month, your school year, like
Yes.
who knows. So I think there are some things that we have to adjust to that are just the reality of now.
So how can we adjust our thinking to help them navigate for us, the new
Hmm.
way?
I think first is listening to them,
Okay.
listening to what's this like for you. Like when your daughter says, "This is what I'm afraid of," they'll take your picture and whatever. Is to respect that and be like, okay, you know what? I don't
Right.
want that to happen to you.
Okay.
I choose when I'm going up by myself, I'm going to
Right.
make a choice to go out looking however I want. But I'm listening to you and I'm hearing that this would be really distressing to you. And so I'll go in, I'll put on a little makeup, whatever. And that's letting our kid know like your feelings matter to me.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to change who I am, but but I can see that this is distressing to you and it's not going to put me out any. Like it's not going to hurt me to go put some makeup
Sure.
on. So I will do this. And you still can say like I just want you to know that this makes me sad for
Mhm.
you and I hope that
Right.
someday this doesn't cuz hopefully you'll reach an age where people don't do that and they don't care because
Mhm.
that's not and I think it's okay to say just so you know that's not normal for people to
Okay.
be
Yes.
judging other people. And somebody who takes pleasure in doing something like that, there there's something going on with them. This says
Mhm.
more about them than it does about you or me.
Right.
And I know that's not going to stop them from trying to ruin your life. So I'll go put on some makeup.
Right.
you know? So it's like the both and.
Right.
And so
Now
they're
to
you're hearing them, but you're
right.
not validating that this is okay. You're not saying, "Oh, you're right. My bad."
Okay.
And I'll go
Yes.
put on a bunch of makeup and like, "Whew, thanks for saving me from myself." Right? You don't want to do that. But
I think especially with summer coming up, I'm like, I barely will put on a stitch of makeup all summer
mhm,
long, and I'm thinking, gosh, I, I just have always pride myself in I will go places without makeup.
mhm.
I still look like it's me,
Yeah.
but they do see things a lot differently. Now to
Well, the
go back to
consequences are
your,
different.
what's that?
The consequences are just different for them than it
Sure,
is for us.
sure. To go back to what you said about boys in college because
Mhm.
my son's going to be a senior. But I did a podcast with an author, Christopher Scott. He wrote a book called "Control Your Mindset, Control Your Life," and he that happened to him. He was a very smart man, very educated, was going to school to be an engineer, and he was like it was ruining his life. He was failing a class, and then the self-doubt that came into that because he
Mhm.
wasn't succeed he succeeded in high school,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
now all of a sudden he's in college and he's failing this one class,
Mhm.
and how that took him into a depression, how he almost
Mhm.
quit school. Even his counselor was I think it was a counselor, either the counselor or a teacher said, "Are you sure this is what you want to go into?" And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
you've got to be kidding that somebody said that to you. And so as a teacher myself, I would hope that we would have even college professors who see that you're struggling and make
Mhm.
that extra step, because how detrimental that could have been. It could have set a completely different
Mhm.
path for him.
Yeah.
But to be in height, like my son gets all A's, and so it's like I could see that happening for him because it's a different level of academics. It's not the
Yeah.
same academics as it is in high school.
And I do think teachers have been forced over the years to become more accommodating to students. I think parents have been kind of bullying teachers from what I hear. Parents have
100% yes.
been pressuring teachers to let kids through without actually doing the level of work that they need to really prepare for college. And so um, these kids are getting A's, but they don't realize this is not the step from 12th grade to freshman year of college. Now the gap is much wider than it
Mhm.
should have been because college professors are not being bullied into
Mm-mm.
adjusting their
Nope.
demands. And
Nope.
so you've got high school teachers who are and have to adjust, then you've got college professors who do not, and so this gap is opening up between high school and college for a lot of students.
Mhm.
And I think again, I also think can't talk about teenagers right now without talking about the pandemic. I also think distance learning set. If I ran the world, I would have made kids do an extra year of school, honestly,
Yeah.
um, because I think that has set them even farther behind.
Sure.
Um, I was able to talk both my girls onto taking a gap year because I have observed so many kids who just weren't mature and ready
Mm-mm.
for college that I thought, let's put in a plan to kind of make up some of that time and get yourself doing some more independent things and, figuring out who you are and what you want. And I don't know. I do think that pandemic distance learning year also has put them at a bit of a disadvantage
Sure, because
for
they've done
succeeding in
studies
college.
on if you missed this grade, then
Mhm.
these are the things that you missed. And so, I mean, and I'm talking about like an elementary level,
Mhm.
and even the social situations that they did not
Yep.
experience.
Yep.
And so here they are in fourth grade and can't function.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to look at the data on that because it's absolutely true
Well,
on
think about middle
the
school.
test.
My youngest was in 7th grade for distance learning. And I mean, at the time it was fantastic because she didn't have to deal with because she is very socially oriented. And so 6th grade was a nightmare for all of us. And then so getting a break from that 7th grade was fantastic. I mean, I was loving it because she
Yes.
was happier, we were happier, like all the drama just disappeared. It was so great. But then watching these kids re-enter without having gone through that wall of fire that is middle school,
Yes.
I think they've really struggled to figure out like, so when do I figure out who my people are?
Hmm.
Who are my people? And I've seen a lot of kids isolate. They don't have a lot of friends. I think because they'd never had the chance to figure out who are my people.
Do you think, so say, let's just talk about my daughter in general, which is many middle schoolers, if not most of them.
Yeah.
If you're not finding your people now, I mean, you do find them in high school. Why is it so different?
I don't know. And I don't think everyone finds their people in high school either. I think one thing that is different is high school, you do have more activity offerings. And
Hmm.
so kids can start doing a little more playing around with different like speech or theater, or and I know middle schools have some of that, but I think as kids get a little older they're more willing to like take some of those risks because they're less worried about what everyone's thinking of them. They kind of leave that intense middle school place of I can't make a single wrong move or my life is over. I do think
Yes.
as they get into high school, that lessens enough that it allows them to seek out some of these other activities. And I think a lot of kids in high school find their people through those activities. Um, and then there's some who don't want to do the activities, and then sometimes they find their friends at work if they get a job, and they make friends. They find their people at place they enjoy working or something. But yeah, I think that I do think once they get out of that middle school mindset of like I cannot make a wrong move,
Right.
it opens up possibilities.
What do you think for mental health issues in teens? What is prevalent right that you
Oh my
see the
god.
most of with them?
Everything. Oh,
Anxiety, I'm sure.
oh my gosh, this could be like a whole hour long soapbox. Um this is one where I am going to put a lot of blame squarely on social media.
Sure.
I think not only are kids struggling more with anxiety and depression, but I think the way mental health is being talked about on social media is exacerbating in its efforts to destigmatize mental health. I think the pendulum has swung too far. And I think now mental health diagnoses are becoming their identity.
Mm,
And so rather than viewing ADHD as a diagnosis that informs what you need in order to function to your potential, now ADHD becomes like, I am ADHD. They actually say, like, I'm ADHD, which is so jarring for me because no, you have ADHD, you aren't
yes.
ADHD. And they'll be like, I'm ADHD, so like I can't write a 12-page paper.
Yes. Gives
I'm
them an excuse.
ADHD, so I can't sit for 2 hours in class. And so I think some of this is and they're seeing all these stories. And my favorite example of this, of how it's influencing them, is there were a bunch of us. This was a while ago. I want to say 20, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago. All of us were getting these. Oh, I've got this little
Oh, look at that.
Zoom bubble. All of us were getting these teenagers coming in, these girls coming in with like saying, I think I maybe have Tourette's. I think I
Oh,
have. We were like,
oh,
where's this coming from?
yes. That's big on social media.
Yeah, and
Yes.
they were like actually presenting with ticks. They had ticks in our, like, we're seeing them and we're like, "Oh my god, what's?" And it actually seemed to this thing on social media seemed to actually start like inducing some of these symptoms of Tourette's in these girls. And it was like, and that's when I remember thinking to myself like, "Oh crap, what are we in
Yes.
for?"
Right.
Because you can, like, a lot of this stuff, trauma, PTSD can be induced by how you understand the things that happen to you. And so if you've
Hmm.
got all these people on social media, they're like, if this thing happened to you, you might have PTSD. And oh, I've got PTSD because this happened. And so you get people who are like, oh, that happened to me. I
Right.
must have PTSD, and now I'm afraid to do this. Now I can't go to this place. Now I'm like, they start developing fears because they're told,
Wow.
like, if you have this thing or if you've experienced this thing, here's what you might notice. And so they start really kind of turning the eyeballs inward and like, oh, maybe I do that. Oh, maybe I think maybe I'm on the spectrum, which means I can't go to a concert now because I'm going to get overstimulated. And
That
so I
is
think,
so interesting.
yeah, so I do think we're
Yes.
seeing this like explosion of kids presenting with these symptoms, and actually demanding diagnoses. Kids and
Mm,
adults are demanding diagnoses. That and it's not that they don't have these symptoms. I just think some of what's making it worse is being surrounded by all this information.
hmm.
And it becomes like an identity. I do think it becomes an identity thing. So we're seeing a lot more anxiety. I mean, tons of anxiety. Um, and I tend to blame our generation of parents on some of this too. I think we were way
Yes.
too overprotective. I think we were way too afraid to let our kids fall, make mistakes, land on their butts, get hurt, you know, have setbacks. I think we were way too protective in that regard.
Hmm.
And so I don't think they have a lot of sense of agency that they can do hard things, that they can recover from failure, that they can, you know, risk something they might not be successful at. So we're seeing tons of anxiety.
Hmm.
We're seeing some depression, of course. And I think the stats back that up. And then social anxiety, a lot of social anxiety.
What would you say are some signs of, well, let's do depression. What would be some signs of depression in your teen?
Again, I'm going to kind of generalize by
Sure.
gender, knowing that there's definitely lots of variability here. Boys tend to withdraw more. They
Okay.
tend to experience depression inward. So you're going to see them withdraw to their room more. They're not going to
Mm,
want to talk. They're not going to want to hang out with their friends. They might not be showering as much. You know, you might see decline in hygiene, decline in appetite, um, irritability.
okay.
Boys and men are more likely to display irritability with depression than girls are. So you might see anger outbursts, um, throwing things, like really like, you know, getting a little more violent. That can be a sign of depression in boys. Girls, it's going to be a little noisier usually. Depression is more crying, more emotional dysregulation, but they can also be sleeping more,
Mm,
um, withdrawing from friends, spending more time kind of disconnecting on their phone, um, being unwilling to turn their phone off. They might be just like kind of fixated on things. Uh, their schoolwork might fall off. They don't want to go to, yeah, they don't want to go to school a lot of times, boys and girls. They'll stop wanting, they'll be refusing to go to school or do their activities. They're going to want to drop out of everything. Um, so those are the things you'll see in both boys and girls. And withdrawing.
that's so scary.
Yeah.
And as a
Like,
teacher too, and I teach special needs kids,
mm,
so um, it's trying to think of all these kids that I have in my life, how you can see some of these things in them, and that's so scary, especially if they don't have the support at home that they
yeah.
need, you
Yeah.
know,
And some kids are very good at hiding it from their parents.
for sure.
um, really good at hiding it. I know psychologists whose teenagers have died of suicide, and
Mm,
they really didn't show many signs at all. They kept it very well hidden. And so
yes.
sometimes depression doesn't have the obvious signs that we know to look for, because kids are good at masking it, and they just they withdraw into their own internal world that they don't share with anybody.
So how do we know when to get them help? If it's not, if it's a phase that they're
Yeah.
going through, they're just having a tough time right now, or we need to get them into therapy.
Well, here's where it's tricky. Depending on the age of your kid, making a teenager go to therapy rarely works.
Okay.
It just doesn't. Um, Therapists also don't want to work with kids who are just sitting there because they were made to go. So you can find a
Silent.
therapist who will see your kid once. Usually it's better to start with a doctor, somebody who's not a therapist, because a kid who's depressed is going to think, my mom wants me to see a therapist because they think there's something wrong with
Something
me.
wrong with me. Mm,
So you want to be really careful with how you bring up this sort of thing with a kid who's dealing with depression. um I think it's no, sometimes it's just observing. It's like we were talking about before, like you seem a little down,
mhm.
and if they say, fine, okay, all right, I just want you to know you seem a little down. I might check back in with you. And you can even say, look, I'm your mom, I'm probably going to check back in with you if you
Yeah,
seem down again in a week. Right? Like,
right,
I always told my kids, like, I reserve the right to care about how you're doing.
right.
So I might check back in just to see, because you do seem down to me. So we can check in with them. And I guess the good news with social media is they're aware of depression and anxiety. This
Mhm.
isn't going to be news to most kids. They're not going to be like, I feel so sad and down. I don't know what this is.
Right, right.
They're going to know
Yeah,
probably,
right.
right? So it's just letting them know I'm here. Let me know if you ever want to, want me to do anything, because you do
Mhm.
seem down. And then it's sitting with that helplessness feeling that I think is the biggest thing for parents is we can
Yes,
only do so much. We
right.
cannot bundle up our 16-year-old, drag them to a therapist's office, dump them on the floor and say, fix my kid, right? We can't do that. And
Yes.
so we can only say, I'm here for you. I love you. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I'm worried about you because you do seem down.
Okay.
It's
Uh,
so hard.
it is. It
So
is.
hard.
Because unfortunately, I do know a couple people who have hit, their kids have died for suicide,
Mm-hmm.
and you wouldn't have known that they were
No,
depressed.
no,
And if you were to ask the parent, they'd be like, absolutely not.
yeah.
Absolutely not. So it's very scary. It's a
It
very
is. It's
scary line that
terrifying.
you've got to walk.
Yep.
you know?
That's why I think checking in with them, letting them know you're there, you care, and you're noticing
Yeah.
is what you can do. And I mean, it is. I am never going to be somebody who's going to say like, well, if they do, they do, right?
Yeah. No,
Obviously,
right.
it's the worst
Absolutely.
thing that can happen,
Right.
and we don't have full control over that.
Hmm. And the guilt that you must feel afterwards, like, how did I not know? How did I not see this? Like, well,
Yeah.
because I showed you zero signs.
Yeah.
You know, this
Yep.
this doesn't have to be something that you missed,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah, and I know, and it's the question that never has any answers ever
No.
for the rest of your life, and that's what makes suicide such a painful thing
Yes.
to live with. But yeah, so with our teenagers, obviously that's what we all worry most about when our kids are going through a rough period, and I think we have to put that aside to some extent because the way we act when we go straight to the suicide fear, I think that's when we do the things that aren't as helpful.
Sure.
That's when we're like pushing and we're being intrusive and that's when we can really break kind of that relationship by letting our own panic
Yes.
um seep into that
Because you get
space
like
with the kid.
hyper
Yeah.
aware of everything and you think the more you push,
Yeah.
that'll get through to them.
And the odds are, I mean, statistically speaking, they're not going to die of suicide,
Right.
right? So we have to hold that yes, you would never fully bounce back from it if your kid is in that small number, and we can't make that small number the guiding factor in all of our decisions as parents,
Right.
because when we parent that way, we don't do our best parenting.
Yeah, in a different panic mode instead of
Mm-hmm.
trying to solve a problem. You know what I mean? It's
Our kids need to know. Here's the other thing that I love to say to parents for teenagers, our kids need to know that whatever they've got going on, we can handle it.
mhm.
And when we're panicked and we're freaking out, then it seems that then the message we're sending them is that whatever they've got going on, we can't handle it.
Yes.
And that is overwhelming for them because then they wonder, am I really broken? Because my parents can't handle
Absolutely.
me. Like I'm just going through a rough patch and my mom's losing her mind. Like she can't handle me. Am
Yeah,
I
that's a
that
great
awful
point.
right now? And so I think we have to, even if inside we're freaking out, I recommend parents who have kids who are struggling with mental health get a therapist because you need a place where you can go freak out, where you can have your panic, have your worries, voice them, and then you have to be able to come back home and act calm and measured and like
That's
I
great
got this.
advice. Yes. That's great advice is you seek the help to so you can get it out and you're still
Mm-hmm.
getting it out and you're getting it out with somebody who can help you rationalize it and
Yeah,
make sense of it all.
and
And
help
then
you
go
figure out,
back.
is this something to worry about
Yes.
or is this like, you know,
Yeah, I love that advice. That's great advice.
or even if it's something to worry about, is there anything you can do about it? The therapist can be
Hmm.
very good at helping you figure out what can you do, what can't you do, and how do we work on accepting, radically accepting
Right.
what you can't do anything about.
Exactly.
I think that's most of parenting teenagers. Okay. Radical acceptance is the key to parenting teenagers.
Right. If you had to give a final thought to parents,
Yeah.
what would be the greatest piece of advice you could give them for raising teens?
With the greatest piece of advice. I would say, I need to think about this for a moment. I would say don't get hung up in the details, meaning keep your eye on the bigger prize here, which is you want to be, you want your kids to know that you love and accept them for who they are and who they're becoming. All of the other stuff, what college are they going to get into? Are they going to make varsity? Will they get a scholarship? What are they going to get on their ACT? Do I like their friends? Do I like their boyfriend or girlfriend? All of that stuff is so secondary to the relationship between you and your teenager.
Right.
Never sacrifice that relationship to try to get them to go where you want them to go
Mm.
because it's
Hmm.
not worth it. It's not worth the price that that relationship will pay to try to push them where you want them to go. Once they're in that 16, 15, 16-year old, really focus on that relationship first and foremost because that's what's going to get them through. That's actually what they're going to turn to when they are considering making a bad choice. They
Right.
are going to be asking themselves, how is this going to affect my relationship with my parent? Because I really value that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I want to push back, but also I don't want to ruin this. And so I think if they don't feel that from you, it's going to be much easier for them to be like, well, screw you. You don't care about me anyway.
Right.
So I always try to encourage parents, focus on that relationship. That is your task, is to let them know you've got their back. You love them even in their worst moments. You can handle what they've got for you. The relationship matters. All of those other things
Mm-hmm.
really are not anywhere near as important at this stage of parenting.
And I think it's, and I think that's so, it sounds so easy.
It's not.
You know what I mean? But it does. If you think about it, okay, well, just don't worry about all the other stuff. Let them, you know what I mean? Yeah, it sounds so easy, yet it's one of the hardest things in the world to
Mm-hmm.
do.
Yeah, because we're afraid.
Yes,
If I'm not on them, what's going to happen?
exactly. Yes. A lot of wise information you laid with us today.
I feel like it just got started. It's so hard. Like talking parenting teenagers is just so full of stuff. And I think I guess maybe if I had to have a part two to advice, get your own therapist. Have somebody you can talk to
Yeah,
because you need to that place to vent and to have somebody who can help you check, is this a concern or is this just my anxiety?
right.
Is what they're doing something I should be pushing back on, or is this something where I need to go to the radical acceptance place? And I think having somebody, especially if you're parenting by yourself, or you and your co-parent don't have a great parenting relationship, you need somebody you can be checking in with
Hmm.
that can be that outside rational objective person
Right,
who can
right.
say, yeah, you know what, I think maybe you're getting a little bit ahead of yourself here on this one. Like I think that's what my therapist did for the last probably 4 years, was a lot of that, of like,
Right.
tell me more about why you're worried about that.
Because really
Yeah.
it will set you on a pet because of confidence. If you don't have, if you're someone who
Yep.
doesn't hold the confidence, the last part you're gonna have confidence in is parenting.
Parenting. Yep.
So
Yeah.
absolutely that would be a reason to,
Yeah.
if you're second guessing every move you make with your children, you need to, there's something you need to work on
Yeah.
with yourself.
And don't focus on making your kids happy.
Right. Oh, for sure.
That is not the objective of parenting.
Yes.
Don't if you're just because they're happy with everything you do does not mean you're parenting well. That
Absolutely. And I
just
know we're
can't
going to do
be the goal.
another episode about co-parenting, and that is a huge piece of co-parenting. Whoo,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to write that down because I see that so
Yep.
much.
Kids will work that
Oh,
split so artfully.
yes,
It's really astonishing how
yes,
well they work that divide. Even when you co-parent
absolutely.
together well, they
Yep,
are they're geniuses.
yes. Just an example today, as a matter of fact, is both my kids took half day off of school. Do you think I knew about that? And they always usually, if they're sick or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, they'll always call me. Will you sign me out of school? Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today my daughter texts me and all it said was "Mama," and I'm like, okay. I'm like, yeah, what's up? Didn't answer me. Didn't answer me. And then I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, And then my son sent me a picture or something. I'm like, wait a minute. It's 12:30. What's going on here? So I checked their location and I'll be damned if they weren't together.
Mhm.
He picked her up from school and I said, well, you guys think you're real tricky. I said, why don't you just tell me that you're taking a half day? And, of course, my daughter told her dad that she wasn't feeling good, so he let her sign out. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, oh,
Yep.
I find out. Why do you even bother?
Yep.
And I
Yeah,
called
they've
my
got
I
the
called my ex. I said, "So the kids are taking a half day." He's like, "I'm real busy right now. Let me call you back in about 10 minutes."
I can hear
Yeah,
lights
exactly.
breaking up.
And that's what I said to my daughter, and she's like, "Yeah, I can't even believe he signed me out because all he kept saying was, call your mother, call your mother, call your mother, call your mother."
Nice. Yeah. But yes, we could have a whole other conversation about parenting teenagers when you're divorced, because that is another ball game altogether.
It
And it is.
is.
And I want to be clear, and I will wrap up with this. It actually is a different ball game altogether. Some of
Yeah.
the kind of rules we apply to when we're parenting married or parenting single, we have to change them when we're parenting with someone we're not married to. So
Writing that down. How our rules, just so I remember to ask
yeah.
you. How our
So
rules different.
most of what I said today still applies. It's still the unconditional
Sure,
love. I'm here. I've got your back.
sure.
But there are other things that we have to adjust that we don't necessarily have to do when we've got another parent there.
Right, right. Well, I look forward to that conversation. I want to do that pretty quickly because that's I love to talk about that because
All right.
everybody's different.
Yep.
So
Sounds good.
thank you so much for doing this
Yeah.
with me. I really appreciate it, and I know I have many friends who will be anxious to hear it.
All right. Great. I hope I was helpful.
Thank you for joining me. As always, do better, expect better, and be better. And remember to laugh through it all. Don't forget to check out my Shopify page where you can pick up some do better, expect better, be better, and some laugh through it all merchandise. Link is in the description.